I want to tell you a story about this man, Steve Gleason. Steve was a football player for the New Orleans Saints, and he made history when he blocked a punt in the opening season after the Hurricane Katrina the previous year had hit New Orleans. Now, up to this blocked punt, it was pretty quiet in the stadium. Steve blocks this punt, and the stadium erupts. If you watch the moment from that game, the announcers are silent, and they just pan through the stadium. People talk about this event as a rebirth, and this is exactly the name of the statue that's in front of the Superdome. It's called Rebirth. Now, Steve retired from football a couple years later, but unfortunately, Steve developed ALS. ALS is a terrible disease. It takes over every muscle in your body. You lose complete motor control. Strangely, you don't lose any brain functionality. People with ALS describe this as an extremely lonely disease. More than half of the people with ALS end up dying in the first 5 years. But Steve's a fighter, and so Steve was going to fight ALS, and that's what he started doing. He partnered with Microsoft to actually be able to become independent after losing complete control of his body. He was able to use his eyes to control a wheelchair, to be able to move around. Steve also started to use the computer with his eyes for synthesized speech so he could communicate with others. Steve shared with us a problem that he had, that he lost the ability to connect with his fans, because Steve loved to connect with fans and sign his signature. And this was something that he really wanted to do again. And so in this case, we wanted to meet Steve's challenge head on. We were excited to make this happen. For me personally, this really hit home. I was born with a disability. I was born with a visual impairment, and I had nerve damage when I was born, which led to visual acuity loss, permanent visual acuity loss, as well as light sensitivity, which is funny to stand up here with the lights. But really, Steve's challenge to us really hit home for me, and I wanted to be a part of it because I've been working on accessibility for my whole life. And so what I wanted to do was really help Steve, but I needed a lot of help. And to start, we really needed someone that could help Steve sign his signature through the use of robotics. And so we have Ashley. I walked into Ashley's office in Microsoft Research, and Ashley has robots moving across the floor, stuff on his desk that's moving. So I told Ashley about this problem, and he lit up. He's like, oh, we can do this. I'm excited. For me at Microsoft, I'm a program manager. I love bringing people together. That really is what my job's all about, connecting people and solving real problems. I get that a lot from my mom. She called me Bugaboo. I'm going to go and get it out there that you can call me Bugaboo, but only here. My mom, my dad is an engineer. Both of them have been huge influences. My sister is my biggest role model, and my best friend. They're all here today. And my wife is also at home with our 2 wonderful kids. Back to Steve. John is someone that's been working with Steve for a long time. The first time that Steve joined this effort with Microsoft, John dug in, and they started to use eye tracking software to actually look at Steve's eyes and actually allow him to interact with different things. So when we talked to John, he really said, yeah, we can make this happen. And then finally, we needed someone to really help us bring this experience together through user interface, through a software component. So we needed a way to track Steve's eyes, and Steve to use some user interface on the computer to control the robotic arm. So we have a lot of great things at Microsoft. We have an amazing robotics lab. We jumped right into the lab. Ashley started showing us a lot of really neat robotics. And we found this guy. This has an amazing gyro that allows us to get really good use of the robotic arm. And we were able to get Steve's signature just in our own testing. It was great. We hooked this up to the software and to the eye tracking, did some testing, and we brought Steve. And we were pretty excited about it. So Steve came into the lab. We showed him how to use the software. And Steve kind of used it, and it went pretty decently. And then Steve said, you know, this thing is really, it looks really heavy. How much does it weigh? And we said, that's a couple 100 pounds. Steve said, well, you know, that's not going to work for me. I'm kind of on the go. I meet my fans wherever I am. And by the way, you know, how much does this cost? It was like a $20,000 robot. And Steve said, you know, it's great that you're solving this problem for me, but what about others with ALS? We all want to sign our finances. We all want to sign a holiday card. And so we tried again. This time we went for a smaller robot. And in this case, it didn't have a very, really complex gyro, but it was really good at drawing circles. And Steve's signature had a lot of circles in it, and so we were excited. We were like, this is going to be perfect. You'll notice it's also kind of lightweight. It was really, you could just kind of take a rubber band and put it to any table. We thought it was going to be perfect. But again, Steve came and he tried it out. And this time he had the opposite feedback for us. Steve said, you know, it's not really, I can't get it to draw my signature correctly. It just looks like a bunch of circles. And, you know, it looks like it's going to fall apart on me. So we felt like we hit a wall. And so I got the opportunity to go down to New Orleans to meet Steve. And I'll never forget knocking on the door and his wife opening the door and me walking into Steve's home and seeing his son Rivers in his lap. And a lot of things started to connect for me. I started to realize that Steve's a real person, and Steve faces real challenges. And in that day, I saw a lot of things that I wasn't really considering as we were inventing. For us, getting into a car is trivial. It can take us a minute and we're on our way. For Steve, this takes 30 minutes to get into the car, 30 minutes to get out. I was amazed at people stopping in New Orleans to say hey to Steve, very much on the go, and Steve loves to connect with people. It was a wonderful day for me to learn, and I was able to come back to the team and talk about that experience with pictures and a lot of information. And so we tried again. This time we found a really neat robotic arm. It's kind of a middle spot in terms of its capabilities. For folks that know robotics, it's a SCARA-style robotic arm. And in this case, it was a $300 robotic arm. It's a pretty good price. And it had a great way to actually connect to Steve's computer, just a standard USB cable. And then finally, the robotic arm had a really nice clamp on it. You could clamp it to pretty much any table. We tried a lot of different examples, and it looked like this was going to work to be a great solution for Steve. So we were able to go back to New Orleans and again meet Steve where he is. And we actually went and we met him at his house. We tried this solution out, kind of held our breath. And Steve tried it, and he said, I think you guys got it this time. So we were really excited. The very next day, we got to go to the Superdome. We got to be with Steve as he signed his first jersey again in a very long time. So I want to share that moment with you. This is Steve here. He's actually using his eyes to look into the computer, and as you'll see this moving, what the yellow dot is doing is actually connected to the robotic arm. So friends, I want to share two challenges for all of us. The first is, if this space sounds interesting and exciting to be able to help people with disabilities, I'd love for you to join me in this. I'm so excited that Microsoft has started what we call the AI for Accessibility program. It's $25 million for inventors, entrepreneurs, to actually bring their ideas around accessibility and AI and machine learning. And you can apply today and be a part of partnering with us to make the future happen for people with disabilities. But also, I think what Tyrone talked about, inventing for humanity, is such a beautiful part of really this invention class that we have. Ironically, Steve just posted this yesterday. This was a week at Microsoft that we actually get together to do hackathons. And so Steve partnered with us a couple years ago to do a couple of these things. And so he sent a tweet for us, which says, technology has the power to change the world. Thank you, Microsoft, for listening to my idea and bringing it to life. It has made a difference in my world and for countless others. I am happy and grateful. Steve Gleason. I think about, we have so little time on this earth to work and do amazing things. And I'm so honored to be a part of this. Steve taught me so much during the time with him, and he continues to teach us so much. So as Tyrone was talking about the framework and to think about people, when we're actually designing, when we're prototyping, think about your customers and involve them in those discussions. When you're actually building that solution and you're kind of hitting walls, go to your customers, listen to them, let them try things out. And then finally, when you ship it or you launch it, it's easy to move on to the next thing. But I would challenge us to get it out there and to work with our customers. In Steve's case, a couple months in, we continue to work with Steve. We found some ways to improve the software to make it faster for him to actually use this. And it's been a real joy to continue to work with Steve on this. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for listening.